from Tanzania, perhaps from Mozambique. And I think the recent, when we looked at the market recently, we saw Vietnamese processors trying to buy RCN at lower levels. The holders of the RCN, and they're pretty strong holders at this point, resisted that. Prices have stayed relatively stable. There's still been quite good interest at the Tanzanian auction. Tanzanian RCN is traded into Vietnam around 15.50. It looks to me as if the raw cashew nut supply is adequate, not oversupplied, that it's that appears to have been recovered this year. Although, again, that's an estimate. We won't know for sure until we get into the early part of 2022. So generally speaking, we can say as a conclusion that demand grew faster than supply in 2021. Positive factor looking forward. Demand was, of course, a distribution and shipping system has been disrupted for something like 18 months. It was functioning at almost capacity, and now with reductions, it's got into something of a crisis. And there's no sign of this short term. If we look in Asia, we've seen congestion and reduced capacity at ports. There was difficulties getting containers for a long time. Spot rates have gone up by at least 10 times. And we see rates quoted around about $8,000 for a 20-foot container from Asia to Europe at the moment. That's a huge impact in terms of cost, but there are also other impacts in terms of delays, longer transit times. We see in Europe, we see certain ports being missed out. So your container is bound for Felixstowe, for example. Felixstowe port is at a high capacity, so they drop your container in Antwerp. And you've got to go and sort out how you're going to get that in. That's a delay. We've seen the introduction of additional charges. We've seen congestion at ports. We've seen ports functioning up around 80+% of capacity, and they're not really designed to work at that level of capacity. So in the short-term impact, this has had an impact on profit lines for most importers, roasters. With fixed price sales, they need to manage. Voyage times going out from, at one point, 45 days, a typical transit over the years, turned into a 100-day transit. And that has huge impact in a lot of areas, not only processing and logistics, but also in finance, also in the ability to meet contracts. And this is happening at a time when demand has been strong and demand has been growing. So the answer to that from many people has been to ship more early, more kernels earlier than they normally would. And it would appear, looking at the statistics, that they've managed to do a pretty good job on that so far. But again, let me say, and I looked at it again yesterday, there's no real sign that this is going away anytime soon. The disruption is likely to continue well into next year. And some people would argue that the higher rates, perhaps not as high as they are now, but some people would argue that the higher rates will be with us for many years to come. From an African perspective, to be a little bit, that the location advantage, especially in West Africa, is greater than ever before. It was a time and a convenience advantage. Now it's a time, convenience, and affordability advantage. But as we've seen, to take advantage of that as an exporter, you need to be of a certain scale, of a certain standard, so that buyers will be interested to buy from you. They won't buy from you just because it's a shorter transit. You have to meet all the other buyer requirements too. This problem is likely to be with us for some time. And we're also seeing some disruption in East Africa as the final factor that we need to consider, where raw cashew nut shipments to Asian countries having been sold in the auction are disrupted. And that's a factor that will play out over the next 8 to 12 weeks and needs to be watched. Still on the subject of consumption and demand, generally consumer trends that were strong for edible nuts and strong for cashews prior to the pandemic and prior to 2021 have continued to exert strong influence throughout this year. We see factors particularly like the consumption of healthier food, natural food, the linking of diet and health. These are very strong factors, and this is general terms for many different trends that are in the market, such as more plant-based proteins, vegetarianism, and so on. And this is leading to other factors too. I mean, we see the trend toward the integration of supply chains, meaning that the processing close to origin, closer links between the primary processor and the roaster or the retailer are becoming more talked about and more important. Some of those have been trends in other markets for many years. We're now seeing them in the cashew chain. Food safety, well, that's not a new subject for us on this event, but it certainly becomes stronger. And transparency in two ways. First of all, traceability of the product, but also transparency in the sense of understanding the impact of the business and the story of the business related to the society, the economy, and the environment in which that business functions. And that's particularly a factor that's grown in 2021. Everyone will be aware of the high profile of climate change talks, but even prior to that, this was a major trend in the edible nuts business and also an opportunity. So it shouldn't be looked at as a barrier. It is indeed an opportunity. So the impact of the pandemic on the
to get this kind of information from your end and great analysis in there. There are some questions, and I would like to go straight to them. Panduranga will want to know whether the consumption pattern in India has drastically shifted from premium grades to average grades in kennels today, and whether this will make markets in India lose interest in ASEAN like Benin. Again, he's asking whether where in Benin, where it seems very high prices for kennels are prevailing today. So what are your thoughts particularly on this?
I think it's unlikely that the demand for Benin RCN, for example, from India would be reduced. There's no doubt that due to its quality, due to its processing characteristics, that there is good demand from India for Benin raw material, and I don't see that disappearing. I think if there is a shift from demand for premium grades in India to average grades, that is not likely to rule out raw nuts that have good processing characteristics. And it's not as if Benin is a massive producer at the moment. We're looking at about 130, 140,000 tons of raw cashew nuts from Benin from a world production of 3.8, 3.9 million tons.
Okay, Jim, the next question, of course, you have talked about significant growth in production in West Africa with IVC, Cote d'Ivoire reaching 1 million tons, really the record level of production. Yet, when you look at the 5-year average, you also talked about slowdown in growth in production, also in production. Now, the questioner wants to know whether we have reached a plateau in terms of ASEAN producing countries. And here he's looking at the global ASEAN crop.
Well, the figures suggest that growth has slowed. So I don't think we could describe that necessarily as a plateau, just that the high levels of growth that we saw in the last 10 years on what we're seeing now will not be repeated in the next 10 years. Now, that will change, of course, if the reasons to plant and increase production are there. So it's particularly likely that in the 5 years to come, that we won't see fast growth. Within those 5 years, that could, of course, be adjusted, and then we'll see fast growth. I think it's too extreme to say that it's a plateau. I think what we should say is that growth rates have slowed. And the combination of slowing growth rates in production and fast growth in demand is of concern, of course.
The next question, Wim, will like to find out how in a difficult year, very difficult year like 2021, Vietnam increased their export. I mean, in its view, how is this possible?
Well, we know that demand was strong. There's probably a number of factors here to be considered. First of all, we know that demand is strong. Secondly, we need to look closely at practice and development in Vietnamese factories. It is something that's quite incredible that given certain restrictions, particularly during August and September, that exports would have continued unabated. So I think we do need to look closely, number one, at import figures at the end of the year rather than at the export figures in order to make a valid comparison. Based on a look at those to the end of September, they would tend to confirm the import figures for the major destinations. I think also that exports would have been impacted by a certain amount of building of inventory in response to the COVID-19 crisis at destination, and maybe something of a transfer of inventory from origin to destination based on fears of longer transits, greater problems in shipments. I think that the capacity in Vietnam to process was always greater in any case. But if I were a buyer of kernels, I'd be concerned. And at this current situation, I'd be concerned that in a crisis that exports have risen, and I'd wonder what's going on behind that. And that would make me very concerned. You would have expected at the start of the year, if you were looking at this, you would have expected that buyers would be early into African processors to get as much product as they could. But of course, the problem that they came up against was finding qualified African processors. Then secondly, you might have thought that they would start to look in India to try and bring back some of the Indian export. But again, if they'd done that, they would have found that the Indian market is much higher than the world market. So India is no longer a source of cashew kernels. So yeah, I can see many reasons for concern in the Vietnamese processing sector, many reasons for concern in terms of the organization of that sector. I think that authorities in Vietnam are conscious of that. And I think that we certainly need to look at this from the point of view of organization and practice within the processing sector in Vietnam, and the comparison of figures at both ends of the chain, both the import and the export. And we also need to closely look at the extent to which relatively low prices can drive the industry to unsustainable trade patterns. It's a really complex question to which I don't have a definitive answer. But thank you for a good question.
Thank you very much, Jim. There is also Martin here who wants to know whether you can share your thoughts on the role of big data in managing the supply chain disruptions in the global supply chain. I don't know what it means exactly by big data, though, but then more or less, is that data that points to all these disruptions? And again, what kind of data can be mobilized and properly analyzed to show the disruptions in the global supply chain?
Wow. Okay. This is a very personal opinion because I'm not qualified really to comment on big data. I wish I was. What I think is that, generally speaking, that the issues here are not so much about identifying the patterns. I think they were well known. I think they're about identifying the level of capacity and the ability of capacity to cope with the crisis. So the data that's really needed, or the data that should be available is all the what ifs. So if you run a system within a couple of % of capacity and you get a breakdown, you're going to have a big problem. And with globalization of the supply chain, it's running at even beyond its intended capacity at times. When you get a disruption in a machine running at that level, you're going to get a big problem. And that's what we've seen. And I don't think that any amount of data would have assisted us in stopping this. What the data that we needed was, what's the impact of a pandemic if one occurs? And of course, that was known at certain levels, but to a certain extent ignored. So I think that for me, we can analyze the system, but what we need to look at is more or less the capacity and the fail-safes and the risks. And I think they were known. So I don't think this was a failure of data at all. I think it was a failure of a failure to ignore warning signals.
Very good. So there is a question here from Nasib, and let me read. He said, "We are BRC certified edible nuts processors from India. We want to know if it's safe to take early position in RCN. As it seems from the last 2 years, there was dip in prices from the opening levels. Your thought and what you advise there?"
My thinking on that is that I certainly wouldn't be too short of RCN between the crops, between now and the new crop. But nor would I be aggressively taking a long position for new crop. This I mean, if you're simply speculating on raw cashew nuts right now, you're probably a bit late. You know, if you think about transit times, if you think about when the product needs to be processed, there's no reason to speculate right now. If you're thinking about if you've got product in a warehouse, should you keep it or should you not? I would say that it's December. There's a new crop coming. It's going to be it'll start in February. I would discourage people from speculating on raw cashew nut prices right now, either holding on to old crop or speculating or buying new crop. Either way, either shorting it or building up contracts on new crop. For me, it's not a great time for speculation. And on kernels, anybody who's aggressively selling kernels forward right now to speculate is making a mistake, in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Jim. There are two questions left. One is on the takeovers in West Africa, whether it is a good thing to consolidate or to merge or even entirely to change ownerships when it comes to the cashew processing factories, and whether that will galvanize a growth in processing in Africa. And what you think really most of these factories should be looking at, whether to embrace it or really to continue in the way they have operated over the years?
I think what I'm particularly referring to is factories that might have been built in the last 3 or 4 years and are now finding that the management and organization of a cashew factory is more complex than they had expected, and that they, with otherwise good factories, otherwise good equipment, good buildings, that they would seek now to perhaps hand their business over to other organizations that are in a better position to manage those businesses. So one of the key factors that's come about is that the management challenge has changed with the onset of semi-mechanized processing. And that the key thing, and unfortunately sometimes it's lost in business planning of new organizations, is to put in the right kind of management with the right kind of skills and experience. So a business that's not finding itself successful in a market in which it should be successful perhaps needs to look at its own management. And there are two ways of doing that. Either you bring in management or you move the business on to someone else who has the ability to manage it. It's generally speaking, we have to say it's not going to fix itself. So if you have a problem in your supply chain or in your process, it needs to be addressed. If you're making too many brokens, if you're finding it difficult to buy raw cashew nuts for whatever reason, it needs to be addressed, because there is a good opportunity here. And when I say that consolidation, what I mean to say is that there's a whole variety for the motivations. There's a whole variety of motivations for the building and investment in cashew processing units, especially in West Africa. And that it often transpires that the ideas behind the construction of the project don't turn out to be as easily organized as they might have been assumed. And therefore, it's about management. And I think that's a key factor. And I'd especially talk about, for the long term, management of the supply chain and the sourcing. And in the shorter term, particularly, as we talked about on one of these earlier events, management of marketing and sales. How is our business presented? How is it organized? And things like food safety certification, absolutely essential. And the idea that, as we referred to, I think it was 4 weeks ago when we talked about marketing, the idea that, build and they will come doesn't work. Build, get it right, manage it well, and for sure there are buyers there. But you need to get yourself into a position where you can meet those buyers' needs. Is it
Thank
a good
you very
thing?
much.
Yeah,
Okay,
it probably is a good thing if factories that are underperforming change hands and become factories that perform well. That is no doubt a good thing.
Very good, Jim. The last question has to do with rationalization Vietnam. If you can give some clarity on that to expand it, I think it's part of the outlook you had given, and it wasn't really clear for some what a rationalization entails.
So rationalization in Vietnam might mean that there would be a change of ownership of some of the long-established factories that may have been in operation for 20 years, have done well. You might be looking at a change of generation. You might be looking at a reason to move the business or the asset on the one hand. So you may see some more foreign investment. You may see some Vietnamese companies buying other Vietnamese companies. Secondly, it seems to me that there is still, and it's sometimes not recognized, that there are a lot of small factories in Vietnam. There are a lot of very small factories in Vietnam. There are a lot of unregulated factories in Vietnam, and that needs to be rationalized. And I think that there has been a recognition of that by the Vietnamese sector in some of their activities. The third factor is that the marketing in Vietnam has to change. Certainly Vinacas has recognized that the addition of further value is important. So we may well see some Vietnamese factories move toward roasting, production of consumer packed products, and there's no doubt that they would have the capacity to do that. So one area of rationalization would be, rather than more, better in the process, better in the level of value addition. And I think that's on the horizon in Vietnam. There may be other areas. You may see changes in the regulation of the export of the cashew machines, for example. That was mentioned again earlier this year, having been a subject of much discussion about 5 years ago. So it could be that in years to come, you'll see fewer, better organized, more food safe, more conscious of labor practice factories in Vietnam. And it might be that the formula for Vietnam, and it's obviously up to Vietnamese processors to decide this for themselves, but it might be that the formula for Vietnam is not better, not more rather, but better. So that the idea of driving your industry simply on increasing exports year on year may not work, especially when that export is primarily based on imported raw material. So what might work is adding further value to the product, or doing that in a way that the product is worth more to the buyer.
Thank you very much, Jim. There is, I said the last question, but one just dropped in. Maybe we take that as the last. From that, it really has elements of supply linkage and also organic cashew processing. So he wants to know whether the professionalization of the producers and processors of organic cashew in, say, Burkina Faso can have an impact on actors in the value chain.
Yeah, I mean, we should paraphrase this answer first by saying that the organic segment is small, and we only talk about certified organic cashews. We don't talk about cashews that are grown without chemicals. We only talk about certified organic cashews. So yeah, it's for sure that the organic system, organic certification, without doubt, causes an increase in the professionalization of the grower. Things like better record keeping, better care and attention to the trees would be part of that. The processing is much the same. There's no organic processing in a certified factory is the same as conventional, but the relationship between the farmer and the processor changes quite a lot in an organic certified system. So organic is probably somewhere between 4 and 6% of the market at the moment. It could be a lot more. It does add to professionalization, so I would agree with the questioner in that respect. But I don't think that at this moment in time that we could consider that the whole sector turn into organic production, because I don't think the market is there for that. But there is a market to increase organic production, and there is an opportunity in that.
Thank you very much, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks for all the support you have given and all the analysis you have done for us throughout the year. We are looking forward actually to having you again in next year and to have all these detailed understanding of the industry. I will also at this point thank the participants for being with us like soldiers of the Global Markets Encounter and accompanying us in this process, and also learning from the great analysis that Jim has been giving. I will at this point hand over to my co-moderator, Blessing Okam. Blessing, are you there?
Yes, Ernest, I'm here. Thank you very much. Thank you both. Thank you to you and to Jim for another session. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you to you for joining us every day. Today is the last session of Global Market Encounter with Jim Fitzpatrick for 2021. We will communicate to you the day of resumption next year. And we also would like to say thank you to Jim for 15th session of Global Market Encounter this year. The next session that we will have online will be on the ACA Cashew Technical Series with Shakti Pal, and that will be on the 8th of December. That is also the last session of the Cashew Technical Series with Shakti Pal, and the time is 9 a.m. We ask that you join us again for us as we close that session for 2021. On behalf of the African Cashew Alliance, we'd also like to thank our sponsors and partners who have made it possible each time for us to bring you a session online. Cashew Info, ComCashew, TechnoServe Benin Cashew, SNI, Intersnack, CNFA, Bro Cashew, and of course the participants for tuning in every Wednesday whenever we have a session. Without wasting much of your time again, we ask that you enjoy the rest of your day and see you next week, Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks very much indeed.
What do you care most when buying color sorters? What makes better sorting performance? What ensures high stability and reliability regardless of 1 unit or 10,000 units? Quality is all. Mayer Smart Factory is built for production of color sorters and dental CBCT. The factory has completed its first phase construction and is the most advanced production base in the industry. Mayer Smart Factory started construction in March 2018 with a construction area of nearly 70,000 square meters and a total investment of nearly $45 million. It takes full consideration of resource conservation, environmental protection, and employee health and safety before designing. The factory takes a multi-layer framed corridor structure, making full use of natural ventilation and lighting. Also, it adopts first-class energy-saving facilities and environmental-friendly materials, making it a true green factory. With the construction concept of first-class equipment and technology for first-class products, Mayer Smart Factory has built over 10 advanced production lines, including the flexible automated production line of dental CBCT, the color sorter assembly line, automatic circuit board SMT production line, unmanned maglev ejector production line, electrical box and sorting box assembly line, which feature high quality, high efficiency, and environmental protection. Mayer Smart Factory delivers a giant leap in stability and reliability. Also, quality of Mayer products is fully upgraded, and equipment maintenance costs are effectively reduced. That makes customers worry-free, totally. Quality is all. Mayer is constantly striving towards the goal of, no matter it is to produce 1 unit or 10,000 units, the quality is consistent. In addition, Mayer's Smart Factory has reduced material waste from the source for production and become more environmentally friendly, fulfilling Mayer's commitment to environmental protection. Also, Mayer Smart Factory is an important part of Green Mayer, which advocates green design, green production, and green management, and gradually realizes the harmony between human and nature, and the harmony between enterprise and society. Mayer Smart Factory is a big step in intelligent manufacturing, which guided by Mayer core values of pursuing quality and serving customers. Another intelligent coating sheet metal production base covering an area of 15 acres and a total investment of $55 million is also under construction. All we do is for product quality. Quality is all.
Benin Cashew is an innovative program aimed at strengthening and growing the Beninese cashew sector. Its goal is to create a more productive, competitive, sustainable, and inclusive economic growth engine for the people of Benin. It's being funded by the USDA and is being implemented by TechnoServe and our partners at CRS. Over 8 years, Benin Cashew will increase the yields and incomes of more than 49,000 smallholder farmers, triple Benin's domestic processing capacity, create more than 3,400 jobs, most of which will be held by women, and will position the entire sector for continued growth long after the project ends.
TechnoServe travaille avec des hommes et des femmes pour bâtir des fermes et des entreprises compétitives qui contribuent à la réduction de la pauvreté, à l'augmentation de la résilience des bénéficiaires et de leur communauté. Nous restons convaincus que la participation pleine et entière des femmes et des filles permet de maximiser la croissance économique inclusive pour un développement généralisé. Au sein de la production agricole et notamment dans la filière cajou, bien que présentes, les femmes sont confrontées à des difficultés en ce qui concerne l'accès aux facteurs de production, notamment la terre, les ressources financières, la technologie et les formations. Au début du projet Benin Cashew, la participation des femmes était d'environ 20,57%. À fin décembre 2020, ce taux est passé à 34,67% au sein de la production et à 39% au sein du projet. L'objectif étant d'atteindre au moins 40% de participation des femmes. Pour atteindre ce résultat, nous avons mis en place un dispositif institutionnel avec tous les partenaires du projet pour intégrer le genre au sein de toutes les activités de ce projet. Nous avons un dispositif basé sur des points focaux genre qui ont reçu des formations sur différentes techniques, différentes thématiques. Nous avons mené aussi un plaidoyer pour la modification des tests statutaires des fêtières, des producteurs de cajou afin d'alléger les conditions d'accès des femmes aux coopératives. Et nous avons pu avoir une femme présidente du conseil d'administration de la fêtière des producteurs d'anacarde et une femme présidente du conseil de surveillance de cette même organisation, ce qui est une première au Bénin au sein de la filière anacarde.
Après mon élection à la FENAPAB, les impressions sont bonnes, surtout être à la tête d'une fédération nationale des producteurs d'anacarde du Bénin. Les points clés de mes actions sont relatifs à la recherche des partenaires pour améliorer la qualité de nos activités, développer le plaidoyer à l'endroit de l'État pour qu'il nous accompagne.
J'ai constaté qu'avec cette formation, la femme a un grand rôle à jouer pour l'émancipation et la prospérité, bien partagée qu'à l'intérieur, qu'à l'extérieur au sein du foyer. Grâce à cette même formation, la population, mais la communauté a un regard craintif en nous. Ils nous copient, ils voient la manière dont nous vivons avec mon épouse. Grâce à cette formation, nous avons pu réaliser beaucoup de choses.
Cette formation que nous avons eue sur le champ nous a réveillés par rapport à la femme, parce que dans le maillon production, on a constaté que les femmes n'ont pas assez à la tête, donc du coup, elles sont marginalisées. Donc sur le terrain, nous voyons ce que les femmes sont prises en compte. Et comme le projet le recommande 40% de femmes, il faut dire que ce n'est pas facile. 40% des femmes dans tout ce que nous faisons, on doit pouvoir toucher au moins 40% de femmes.
Investissez dans les filières coton et anacarde, créez de la valeur ajoutée et contribuez à la lutte contre la pauvreté en milieu rural. Les filières coton et anacarde ivoiriennes, ce sont un potentiel de production de plus de 600 000 tonnes de coton-graines, 258 000 tonnes de fibres de coton, une position de premier producteur et premier exportateur mondial de noix brutes de cajou, un potentiel d'installation de plus de 100 unités de transformation de noix brutes de cajou d'une capacité de 5 000 tonnes, un marché d'intrants coton de plus de 60 milliards de francs CFA par campagne agricole, plus du quart de la production mondiale et près de la moitié de l'offre mondiale de noix brutes de cajou, un immense potentiel de création d'emplois et de richesses.
Get your copy of the ACA Cashew Barometer. To access diverse industry data like RCN statistics comprising land area, yield data, RCN production volumes, CFR and farm gate prices, volumes of traded RCN. You can also have kernel statistics such as volumes of raw cashew nuts processed, quantities of kernels traded, and FOB prices. With the premium edition, you can view your chart in so many ways using Excel filters. In addition to this, you also have access to cashew heat and policy maps covering RCN policies in different cashew producing countries, processing policies, and map of African producers and beyond. Get your copy now of the ACA Cashew Barometer.
Salma. I'm the CEO of Ivoirienne de Noix de Cajou. Today, cashews are faceless, and our aim is to give cashews an identity. More than 40% of raw nuts in the world are produced in Ivory Coast, and we believe the cashew identity should be African. So we set up this factory to connect the value chain between the farmers and the consumers. The farmers are fragmented and the consumers are disconnected, and we are here as the processor to connect the two and tell you the story. And this is the story about creating jobs for women and youth in a country that has grown cashews historically but not processed.
Je m'appelle Amani Loukou Charlotte. Mon village c'est Djedou en Ouzé. J'ai 7 enfants. C'est champ d'anakat là je prends pour faire école de mes enfants.
Problème blue akisi Véronique. Wakamasi kai. Okranya ba mo ferike mi. Nya mi no are dike ba. Okranya yare. Itiga wakamanya suebo. Iko wetia iko kranga we gwa kronsuwa. Le problème e o Djedou onze.
Hello, my name is Luis Tito. I am plant manager of EN Cashew. We are focused to make the best quality with the best product, especially for you. We are nuts about cashew.
My name is Ashta Sherif, a quality director at EN Cashew, a BRC certified company in Ivory Coast. My team and I are working every day to ensure a safe product for you and healthy environment for all of our employees.
What do you care most when buying color sorters? What makes better sorting performance? What ensures high stability and reliability regardless of 1 unit or 10,000 units? Quality is all. Mayer Smart Factory is built for production of color sorters and dental CBCT. The factory has completed its first phase construction and is the most advanced production base in the industry. Mayer Smart Factory started construction in March 2018 with a construction area of nearly 70,000 square meters and a total investment of nearly $45 million. It takes full consideration of resource conservation, environmental protection, and employee health and safety before designing. The factory takes a multi-layer framed corridor structure, making full use of natural ventilation and lighting. Also, it adopts first-class energy-saving facilities and environmental-friendly materials, making it a true green factory. With the construction concept of first-class equipment and technology for first-class products, Mayer Smart Factory has built over 10 advanced production lines, including the flexible automated production line of dental CBCT, the color sorter assembly line, automatic circuit board SMT production line, unmanned maglev ejector production line, electrical box and sorting box assembly line, which feature high quality, high efficiency, and environmental protection. Mayer Smart Factory delivers a giant leap in stability and reliability. Also, quality of Mayer products is fully upgraded, and equipment maintenance costs are effectively reduced. That makes customers worry-free totally. Quality is all. Mayer is constantly striving towards the goal of, no matter it is to produce 1 unit or 10,000 units, the quality is consistent. In addition, Mayer's Smart Factory has reduced material waste from the source for production and become more environmentally friendly, fulfilling Mayer's commitment to environmental protection. Also, Mayer Smart Factory is an important part of Green Mayer, which advocates green design, green production, and green management, and gradually realizes the harmony between human and nature, and the harmony between enterprise and society. Mayer Smart Factory is a big step in intelligent manufacturing, which guided by Mayer core values of pursuing quality and serving customers.